I never imagined that a simple package could unmoor my reality. But on a chill October evening, as the wind rattled the loose window panes of my aging apartment, I discovered the unmarked VHS tape lying on my doorstep. Its plastic case was battered and inexplicably warm to the touch, as if it had been hidden away from the cold for far too long. My heart pounded with a sudden dread even before I dared to examine it further. Michael, an ordinary guy with an unremarkable life, or so I thought. I had always been drawn to the relics of the past, dusty antiques, old photographs, forgotten recordings. There was something about them that whispered of stories that defied time. Yet nothing had prepared me for the terror that would soon seep into every corner of my existence. That night, after a long day of editing my latest video for my modest YouTube channel, I settled into my worn armchair with the tape in hand. The label was blank, its only markings the faded remnants of indecipherable smudges. With a mixture of curiosity and foreboding, I loaded the tape into my ancient VCR, a contraption I kept solely for nostalgia's sake. The screen flickered to life and as static slowly gave way to images, a single question echoed in my mind: who sent this and why now? At first, the footage seemed innocuous, a family gathering in an old farmhouse, laughter and clinking glasses in the background. But as the tape continued, the scene shifted inexplicably. Shadows lengthened and danced in corners where no one stood. A soft, almost imperceptible hum began to underlay the familiar sounds. I found myself leaning forward, straining to hear the murmurs that drifted between the laughter, as if an unseen presence was trying to speak through the static. Then came the moment that changed everything. In the midst of the gathering, the camera zoomed in on an empty chair at the head of the table. The once cheerful ambience soured into something deeply sinister. I remember feeling a cold hand brush against the back of my neck, though no one else was in the room with me. The images on the screen started to warp. The faces of the guests melted into expressions of horror as if they were witnesses to an unfolding nightmare. I tried to turn off the VCR, but the machine stubbornly continued playing, its dial spinning as if possessed by an unseen force. It was then that I first heard the whisper, a raspy voice, indistinct yet insistent, murmuring words I couldn't quite grasp. The sound resonated from the speakers in a way that bypassed my ears and settled deep within my bones. My hands trembled as I fumbled with the remote, and in that agonizing moment, the room around me plunged into darkness. I sat there, paralyzed, while the only light came from the flickering images on the TV screen, a macabre tapestry of memories and horrors that defied explanation. Over the following days, my world transformed into a waking nightmare. Every time I tried to forget the tape, unexplained phenomena began to occur. Footsteps echoed in the empty hallways of my apartment. Shadows danced in peripheral vision, disappearing as soon as I turned to face them. I became convinced that something from that tape had followed me home, a malignant force that had seeped into my reality. I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched even as I lay in bed late at night, my eyes darting to the dark corners of my room. In the hours that followed, I found myself drawn back to the VCR. I'd sit for hours, rewatching the tape, desperate to uncover some clue as to what I was witnessing. Each viewing brought new details: a gloved hand that wasn't part of the original scene, the fleeting glimpse of a figure standing at the window of the farmhouse, eyes filled with unspoken despair. The tape seemed to evolve before my eyes, its images distorting into a narrative that wasn't there before. I started to notice a recurring symbol, a faded, almost imperceptible sigil etched into the woodwork of the farmhouse, that sent shivers down my spine. As I delved deeper into the mystery, my sleep became riddled with nightmares. In my dreams, I was transported back to that eerie farmhouse. The atmosphere was thick with decay, the air heavy with an ancient, malevolent presence. I could hear the whispers again, louder now, and feel an insidious pressure on my chest, as if the very weight of the curse was trying to suffocate me. Every time I awoke, the echo of that voice lingered, haunting my every thought. One night, driven by a mix of dread and determination, I decided to confront the horror head-on. I packed a flashlight, a notebook, and my camera, the same one I use for my YouTube videos, and set off to find the farmhouse from the tape. The address wasn't clear in the recording, but I trusted the dim, flickering landmarks in my memory to guide me. The road was desolate, bordered by gnarled trees and dense fog that swallowed the light of the moon. My pulse raced as I approached a crumbling estate hidden deep in the woods. The farmhouse loomed ahead, its silhouette a jagged scar against the night sky. Stepping inside, I was immediately struck by a nauseating blend of damp decay and an inexplicable metallic tang. The interior was shrouded in darkness, lit only by the weak beam of my flashlight. I advanced slowly, every step echoing in the oppressive silence. My camera's red recording light was the only sign of life in this forsaken place. As I explored the dusty rooms, the same symbol from the tape appeared carved into the doorframe, a mark that felt both ancient and cursed. I reached the dining room, where the table was set as if for a feast, though no living soul was present. Candles lay unlit, their wax hardened into grotesque shapes. Suddenly, the temperature plummeted, and the sound of soft, deliberate footsteps resounded from the corridor. I froze, heart pounding, as the shadows seemed to coalesce into a shape, a figure in tattered clothing, its eyes hollow and desperate. The apparition moved slowly toward me, its movements jerky as if caught between this world and another. Before I could react, the figure whispered in a language I couldn't understand. The words rippled through the air, filling the space with a dread that seeped into my bones. In that moment, I knew that I had become entangled in something far beyond my comprehension. The spirit's eyes locked onto mine, and I felt an overwhelming urge to flee, to escape this cursed domain. But the force of the entity held me captive, its spectral grip pulling me deeper into a reality where time and sanity blurred into insignificance. I managed to tear myself away and sprint back through the labyrinthine corridors of the farmhouse. Every turn seemed to lead me into a deeper pit of despair. The sound of that voice echoed in my mind, and I could almost feel its icy breath against my neck. Finally, I burst through the front door into the night, my lungs burning with cold air and terror. I didn't stop running until the farmhouse was nothing but a dark silhouette against the horizon. For weeks afterward, the horror persisted. The tape continued to play on loop in my mind, its images haunting every waking moment. At night, I awoke drenched in sweat, the ghostly whisper echoing in my ears. I began to research the symbol and the legend of a cursed recording, a tale passed down among locals about a spirit trapped between worlds, seeking release through a medium as ancient as the VHS tape itself. The legend claimed that the tape was a vessel, a conduit for a restless soul who had once been wronged in life and now sought vengeance through unsuspecting viewers. The more I learned, the deeper my fear grew. I started to notice subtle changes in my own behavior. I became withdrawn, jumpy, and haunted by an overwhelming sense of impending doom. One night, as I sat editing footage from my journey, I heard a faint tapping at my window. I peered through the curtains, expecting to see a branch or a stray animal, but there was nothing. Instead, I saw a pair of eyes, a pair of deep, unblinking eyes, reflected in the glass. I slammed the window shut, my heart pounding in disbelief. Had the spirit followed me home? I tried to rationalize it as a trick of the light, but deep down I knew that nothing would ever be the same again. The situation reached its peak one fateful evening. I had resolved to destroy the tape, convinced that ending its cursed cycle was the only way to reclaim my life. I took the VHS to an abandoned warehouse on the edge of town, a place rumored to be haunted, where old technology and forgotten relics were left to decay. As I prepared to burn the tape in a makeshift fire, the ground trembled beneath my feet. The flames leaped higher than expected, and the tape hissed as if alive. A deep, guttural laugh echoed around me, bouncing off the walls in a maddening rhythm. The fire cast grotesque shadows that danced across my terrified face. In that moment, the air around me warped and I saw the spirit once more, its spectral form emerging from the conflagration. The figure's eyes glowed with a baleful light, and it pointed a long, skeletal finger at me. Time slowed as I felt an icy chill sear through my veins. I tried to scream, but no sound emerged. The entity moved closer, its presence overwhelming every sense, until I could feel its malignant energy pressing against my soul. And then, as quickly as it had appeared, the figure dissolved into swirling embers that scattered on the wind. I collapsed onto the cold, concrete floor, my mind racing with questions and terror. Had I truly banished the curse, or had I only angered the spirit further? My body trembled uncontrollably as I realized that the incident was only the beginning. In the following days, the nightmares intensified. I would awaken to find cryptic symbols etched on my walls, and whispered voices would call my name in the dead hours of the night. My video recordings, once filled with mundane content, now captured fleeting glimpses of otherworldly movements, a spectral hand brushing against the lens, or a figure looming in the background where there should be nothing. One evening, determined to put an end to this nightmare once and for all, I gathered the courage to rewatch every frame of the tape in a final bid to understand its mystery. I scrutinized each scene, pausing at the moments when the atmosphere shifted, the camera panning slowly to reveal a hidden room in the farmhouse that I had never noticed before. In that hidden room, the air was heavy with sorrow and malice, and a series of cryptic messages were scrawled on the walls. The messages, written in an archaic hand, spoke of a ritual, a binding curse meant to trap a tormented soul between life and death. I recognized one of the symbols. It was the same sigil that now seemed etched into my very being. The realization struck me with paralyzing force. The tape wasn't just a recording, it was a gateway. Every time I played it, I was inadvertently feeding the curse, tethering my fate ever closer to that cursed soul. I recalled the legend. If you watched the tape until the very end, the spirit could cross over into your world permanently. In my desperate attempts to rid myself of the curse, I had only accelerated its inevitable hold over me. As the final moments of the tape played out, I could see the spirit's face, a contorted, agonized visage that seemed to scream silently. The camera zoomed in on its eyes, and for a moment, I felt as though the spirit was pleading for release. But then the image shattered into static, and the sound of that raspy whisper returned, louder and more commanding than ever before. In that dreadful instant, I understood that my life, and the lives of those who might watch my videos, were now irrevocably bound to this malevolent force. I left the warehouse that night, my steps unsteady and my mind a swirl of terror and regret. The cursed tape had changed me. I felt its presence in every shadow and heard its call in every gust of wind. Even now, as I record this confession for my YouTube channel, a desperate attempt to warn others, I am haunted by the knowledge that the spirit may still be watching, waiting for its next chance to break free from the confines of its prison. I often wonder if the tape was meant for me, if fate had chosen me as the unwitting vessel for this ancient curse. I've tried to warn myself, to warn anyone who might find solace in the predictable nature of our modern lives, that there are things lurking in the forgotten corners of history that defy logic. The tape from nowhere was not merely an object. It was a message, a relic of sorrow and anger that had transcended time. And now, as I write these final words, I can't shake the feeling that somewhere in the darkness beyond the flickering screen, the spirit is waiting to see who will be its next victim. Even as I type this, I hear the faint sound of static in the background, a reminder that the tape is still playing in some corner of my mind. The room grows colder by the second, and the shadows lengthen, creeping ever closer with secrets they dare not share. I wonder, will the curse ever truly be broken, or is it destined to persist, haunting every future viewer who stumbles upon its cursed frame? I leave you with this thought, dear viewer: if you ever come across a mysterious tape with no markings, would you dare to watch it? The answer may not be as simple as you think.